worker cooperatives. My name is Jamison, and I work with the Vermont Employee Ownership Center. And when we talk about employee ownership, we talk about cooperatives, worker cooperatives on one side of the spectrum, but on the other side of the spectrum, ESOPs, which are employee stock ownership plans, which are basically trust ownership on behalf for the benefit of employees, where employees get really a share of equity, but they don't get much of any control. Worker co-ops, of course, are democratic organizations like all other co-ops, and they're really a different kettle of fish. So I kind of look at two spectrums. One is the spectrum of cooperatives, and worker co-ops, I'll tell you, are the coolest. And the other spectrum is employee ownership, and worker co-ops are also the coolest. So, very cool. And I should also, I guess, say at this point that it's the smallest sector in the state of cooperatives, right? So it's only, I counted 10 worker cooperatives or collectives. I was trying to count the collectives. I'm sure there are a bunch that I don't know about, but I counted 10 of them. And I think if I just go through and tell you about each of them, it won't take very long, you'll get a sense of what kinds of businesses they are and a little bit about the history of cooperation in the state. So I'll be fast. It's not going to take that long, honestly. Number one, data systems. I think is the oldest in the state. If not, it's the second oldest. It's a little kind of accounting software firm that was founded in the 70s by Don Schramm and Barbara Nolfi. Barbara Nolfi was for a long time a city councilor in Burlington. Don Schramm is a big co-op leader who helped to found, or helped to get Onion River Co-op to the city market, and is now leading the charge, or helping to lead the charge with a bunch of other people to create a cooperative to buy Burlington Telecom. So very idealistic people, a very small cooperative that started with just the two of them. Maybe there were three. It didn't really add very many members, and it stayed about the same size. Now they're trying to retire and hoping to turn it over to some new people, but they've not really grown very much. Number two, speaking of old worker co-ops, maybe the oldest, Green Mountain Spinnery, also formed in the 70s by old hippies. They were younger at that point. There were three of them who founded it. No other members joined, although they gave people opportunities. Why? Because they were not profitable. In fact, the three founders were having to put a lot of their own money to keep the business going. They had to make loans for the company. So when it came time for them to retire, the company was marginally profitable. They reorganized, they made some things more efficient. Now there are 9 owners of that, so it really is a real cooperative again. As it was intended to be originally, it really wasn't for a long time. So not very profitable, pretty much the same size for a long time. Number 3, now we're kind of in the southern part of the state, so I'll talk about Brattleboro for a minute. The Rohan Tech Collective, which is the successor to the Brattleboro Tech Collective, a little kind of a website formation kind of a place. 2 or 3 people, small, very egalitarian. They talk about sharing everything and rotating jobs and all that sort of stuff. Pretty small. They've not grown very much either, and they seem to have personnel problems. And I don't know if they're still in existence. Brattleboro Holistic Health Center came out of a sale of a kind of alternative healing center by the founder who wanted to get out and retire, sold it to the employees. Actually, they weren't employees, they were kind of contractors. And this is, they call themselves a worker cooperative, but it's really a cooperative of separate producers. I think they actually might have figured that out by now. But, again, it's about 7 people, so also still small. Coming back toward us, Montpelier, there's the newest cooperative in this worker cooperative in the state that I know of is Catamount Solar, which is a solar installation company founded by people with a couple of other employees. It's actually structured as an LLC, but it's a worker co-op according to its membership agreements and its democratic structure. Also in Montpelier is Tulsi Tea, which is definitely a hippie co-op. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a great place. They have all kinds of, herbs, and they make these really peculiar, interesting cookies. And they have community space where they have sings, on weeknights, and it's a great space. It's kind of along the lines, has a similar flavor to maybe the Langland Street Cafe, which is no more, alas. was also a kind of a collective. It was really an S corporation. It was owned by just a few people, didn't make any money. The poor people finally gave up. Black Sheep Books was another kind of an anarchist collective which folded just a couple years ago, had a storefront in Montpelier. They call themselves a worker co-op too, I think.
Volunteer.
But they're no more. Volunteer co-op, yes. So, I mean, I think you're kind of getting the picture. Just about all of these are founded by very idealistic people and run in a pretty egalitarian manner, as egalitarian as they can manage. They tend to be small, they start small, they stay small. Now we're getting to some exceptions to that trend. Not yet, though. Two cooperative farms in the Intervale. Arethusa Collective Farm had 3 members originally. Now I think there's just 1. They have seasonal employees. Well, that's about as small as you can get for a cooperative. Much. Well, I think it's actually legally incorporated. It has bylaws that say it's a worker co-op, but there's only 1 member. Maybe it's like multiple personalities. Anyway, the other collective farm in the Intervale is Digger's Mirth, which has been around for a long time and is quite successful. Very, ardent, egalitarian people who are doing a great job of farming, and they make some money at it. It's really a success. Now, the last 2, Red House Building, sometimes I think it's usually just called Red House, is a construction business that began as a sole proprietorship, 1 owner with several employees. The employees said, gee, we'd like to keep working with you, Dunbar, who was the founder, but we'd like to be business owners ourselves, and it's very tempting to go off, as it often is the case for contractors. At a certain point, it makes more sense to go out and start your own business. Well, they said, we'd like to stay with you. How can we share ownership? So they discovered Martha's Vineyard, this wonderful company called South Mountain Company, and they modeled themselves on that. It's a cooperative that's been around since 1987. So it's a really well-organized, well-run, very successful, profitable business. So Red House Building began with 5 members, including the original founder and 4 other employees who have been employees, now are co-owners. And it's grown. It now has about 24 people working for it. About half of them are owners, and that's only since 2008 or so. So there's a case where the worker co-op structure really matched the industry sector really well, and it solved some problems. And I think it has kind of the flavor a little bit of a guild. Real high craftsman, high quality construction, reputation is excellent, and it's going very well. And people are actually making good money there. Last one is PT360, which until the Catamount Solar people came along was the newest worker co-op in the state. It's a physical therapy practice, which began as kind of a breakaway from another business. 12 people got fed up with their manager, basically, and decided they were going to do their own business. And by damn, they were going to do it themselves. They could do a better job. They wanted to start their practice with a pool, which is a lot of money, and takes a huge investment. They actually invested about, I think it was $400,000 before they started up. So this makes it kind of a nice segue. Capital. Capital is one of the reasons that there aren't more worker cooperatives, right? Access to capital. Because if it's just a bunch of, people, I don't know, what are you going to do? If you want to start a worker co-op, what industry sector are you going to go to? You and your friends. You'll probably start a cafe, maybe a farm on leased land, something that's not going to cost very much money because you probably can't borrow a lot. So PT360 started up with a $400,000 investment, thanks really to one member who was very devoted to this. She really wanted to see this business happen, and she put her personal money into it in the form of preferred non-voting stock. So it remains a one-person, one-vote entity, but there's this capital in the form of preferred stock, which will be paid out to this one member who made this major investment. So that's really amazing and exceptional. There are other co-ops, very successful co-ops, that are using this model of preferred stock to bring capital in. Equal Exchange is probably the best known example. It's a fair trade organization. You probably all know of it. You can buy chocolate bars at the co-op by Equal Exchange, and also fair trade coffee and bananas. They do a lot of fair trade products now. They're kind of co-op through and through. They trade where they buy from co-ops in Latin America, and they are a cooperative themselves. So they raise capital by issuing preferred stock to customers a lot of times who believe in their mission and buy this stock, which will give them a modest rate of return. So thinking about what makes for successful co-ops and maybe how we can get more of them, one is that if you want to run a collective, you really have to have excellent rules. You have to have great policies, really well thought through, because your manager is going to be your rule book, pretty much your policy manual. And Collective Copies, I should mention, is right across the border down in Amherst, is a really good model for that. They have an excellent manual of policies that really govern how things work, and it works very well. Number two is, if you want to grow, you need some people who are empowered to be entrepreneurs, who can actually make entrepreneurial decisions, who can commit the company to directions which maybe a larger committee wouldn't agree upon. They have to be a little bit daring sometimes. I mean, that's why companies grow, is people take risks and they will commit their company to a certain direction. So delegation of authority is something that co-ops have been worker co-ops have been a little bit reluctant to do. This is a problem that was identified in 1899 by Beatrice Webb, who wrote about English worker co-ops. She said one of the reasons that they fail is that they don't have adequate leadership. They can't figure out. Everybody says, well, we all own this, so we should all decide everything all together all the time. But companies work best, at least on a larger scale, when there are people empowered to make leadership decisions. So leadership and capital and, other things too.